The leaked text messages Labour claim show the government did a deal to stop a 15% council tax hike in Conservative-held Surrey.
And is the same sweetheart deal on offer to every council facing the social care crisis created by her government?
Good evening. Surrey is certainly a blue heartland with its 11 Conservative MPs, 3 cabinet ministers and a Tory council. Tonight, the texts from the leader of the council, intended for a man named Nick in Whitehall, but in error sent embarrassingly to a Nick who heads Labour's Newcastle Council. Surrey was planning a tricky referendum, testing the loyalty of voters to try to raise the council tax by 15% to fund social care. What was Surrey's leader trying to get from Whitehall to avoid such an unpopular move? Tonight, some awkward questions and a few answers. And inevitably tonight, we're live at Westminster as MPs vote on a series of amendments on the government's Brexit bill.
Also on the programme, the UN calls for a $2 billion emergency fund for Yemen, warning 12 million people face starvation amid the war. The landmark ruling won by a bereaved woman, which means she can claim the pension of her late partner, and how millions of others could now benefit.
You know, people had said, you're not entitled to that because you weren't married. That was like putting salt into my wounds. That because we weren't married, that our love was any less.
And seizing the day to get into the United States. We're with a Yazidi couple in Iraq, jetting in whilst Trump's travel ban is suspended.
And tonight, in the latest report in Channel 4's fake news series, we report on the far-right movement which says it helped get Donald Trump elected and the young Brits being attracted by its ideas.
We're not young people who don't know what we're doing. You know, this isn't like a phase or whatever. Like, we genuinely want to kind of like make it all shiny and new.
We've all done it. Embarrassingly sent a text message to the wrong person. Unfortunately for the leader of Surrey County Council, texts apparently sent by him ended up being aired at Prime Minister's questions. The Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn ambushed the PM with leaked messages he claimed showed the government did a sweetheart deal with the council to avoid a politically damaging hike in council tax. Our health and social care correspondent Victoria MacDonald has this report.
Tory-run Surrey Council's plans to hold a referendum to raise council taxes by 15% took many by surprise. But there was another surprise today, this time for the Prime Minister, as Jeremy Corbyn revealed a series of text messages.
I've been leaked copies of texts sent by the Tory leader David Hodge, intended for somebody called Nick, who works for ministers in the Department of Communities and Local Government. And these texts read, I'm advised that DCLG officials have been working on a solution and that you will be contacting me to agree a memorandum of understanding.
The response from Nick, and it's not clear who Nick is, shows that he did not know what Mr Hodge was talking about. So the council leader sent another text with more details, including the line, "The numbers you indicated are the numbers that I understand are acceptable for me to accept and call off the R, in other words, the referendum." Channel 4 News also understands that the Nick who actually received the texts was Nick Forbes, the leader of Newcastle City Council and a member of the Local Government Association, and that he may not have been warned that Mr Corbyn was about to release the texts. In the Commons, the Labour leader accused the government of a sweetheart deal with the council to avoid what would have been an embarrassing move.
All councils have the opportunity to raise the 3% precept, to put that funding into the provision of social care.
And despite another 5 attempts, Mrs May did not admit to a deal or no deal.
What that memorandum of understanding is, well, nobody seems to be able to explain it. But what we do know is that councillors turned up here yesterday expecting to be discussing a referendum to raise council tax by 15%. Instead, a revised agenda suggested 4.99%, which meant that they wouldn't have to call that referendum.
The Lib Dem council leader here said the meeting yesterday was chaotic.
We had 3 adjournments. The budget meeting was delayed to the afternoon, and then we were presented with a 5% increase in council tax.
Was it explained to you at any point during that meeting yesterday how the council could go from needing 15% to needing only 4.99%?
Well, the leader of the council said that he was taking a risk that a solution could be found, but we were given no detail about how that would be achieved or whether some arrangement had been made with the government.
And this was yesterday's meeting where Mr Hodge suddenly announced the changed budget. Today he wasn't in his office. He was variously described as being in Belfast, Wales and at a Rotary event. Surrey is awash with Conservative MPs, including Jeremy Hunt, the Health Secretary, and Philip Hammond, the Chancellor of the Exchequer. And it cannot have been comfortable for them when the council first announced its plans. Today, a statement from Mr Hodge said there had been no deal, but 62 Labour councils tonight have written to Mrs May to seek assurance that they get the same as Surrey.
Well, it's not just those texts that have been debated at Westminster. In the last hour, MPs have begun voting on a series of amendments to the Brexit bill that gives the Prime Minister the authority to take the UK out of the European Union, or start the process at least. Our political editor, Gary Gibbon, is outside the Commons chamber now. Gary.
Well, the moment of maximum danger, really, for the government and this bill came yesterday with that vote on the amendment over whether there should be a meaningful vote further down the passage of negotiations, which would allow MPs potentially to throw the negotiation back in new order in a completely different shape back into Brussels. That didn't happen. It fell. The government had a majority of 39. The majorities on these amendments tonight are comfortably above that, and that means that the government is getting almost certainly what it wanted, in the jargon, a clean bill going through to the House of Lords, one that is unamended, and that is supposed to mean that the Lords don't feel they have the licence, don't actually have the nerve to amend it too heavily. Well, we'll see how that ends up. Another little crisis happening, mini one really, but nonetheless eye-catching on the Labour benches, because there could be up to 4 resignations by the end of tonight from Labour's front bench, from people who don't want to vote for the whole bill unamended. A little bit of destabilisation, you could argue, just when Labour probably doesn't need it. Here's how the day went here.
Theresa May didn't want this bill, thought it could only bring trouble. In the end, the difficulties of getting a House of Commons made up of 75% pro-Remain MPs were overcome. Theresa May insisted the concession, which cut down a Tory rebellion last night, meant MPs would get a vote at the end of the negotiations.
We will bring forward a motion. That motion will be on the final agreement. It will be for approval by both Houses of Parliament. It will be before the final agreement is concluded.
Antoinette Sandbach was one of 7 Tory MPs who rebelled last night because that was not enough.
I think we should have an opportunity to vote deal or no deal. And I think if there's no deal, we need to scrutinise that. We need to go through it. We need to know what the plan is.
And potentially push the Prime Minister back into the negotiating room with a different brief.
Well, we simply don't know.
But that could be a possibility, that you want reserved for Parliament.
Yes, I don't think it undermines her position at all.
Amendments debated today never had enough cross-party support to threaten defeat. The SNP said a new opinion poll suggested a different threat to the government.
The barracking of honourable members opposite and the preventing of SNP MPs from speaking in this House plays right into our hands and results in headlines for this: support for independent surgery.
On the Tory benches, signs that a small rebellion does not mean divisions are forgotten.
The whole tone of the debate, obviously, since the referendum has been so awful and unpleasant, and the forgetting that 48% of the country voted to stay in the European Union, and the inability to build a consensus about the way forward.
I would ask him whether he was concerned, when we appear to be going to stay in the EU, about the terms of TTIP and what that would have done to British farmers. Was he concerned about that, or is he only concerned when it sort of feeds his remaining Remain tendencies?
Up to 4 Labour frontbenchers may defy the 3-line whip in the last vote of the night on the whole unamended bill, including Clive Lewis, touted by some as Jeremy Corbyn's possible successor.
Well, I've got to make a decision on how I vote, haven't I? So, how long have you been there for? It's so cold. Sorry.
Can you give us an indication?
You're not, if I start running, you're not going to run after me.
We're not going to run. I don't think we've got it in us. Can you tell us which way you expect to vote today?
No, I don't know. I'm going to make my mind up, and a lot on my plate.
Good morning, sir. Jeremy Corbyn less relaxed about cameras at his front gate.
How nice of you to come here this morning.
Today, Jeremy Corbyn's team denied claims he was preparing to quit as Labour leader and had even told aides a date for his departure.
Joining us now, Heidi Allen for the Conservatives and Angela Rayner, Labour's Shadow Education Secretary. Angela Rayner, let's just start with you because, I mean, this was the whole business of Brexit was something which Tory leaders never wanted. No, neither Mr Cameron nor Mrs May. And yet the party that's fallen to pieces is not the Tory party, but your party. 4 more resignations from the front bench tonight, probably.
Well, I've not seen any resignations from our front bench, and we've been absolutely clear right from the start of this process. Our leadership has quite clearly been that we respect the votes. We had a referendum, it divided the country, that's quite clear. However, it was also clear that the referendum result was that we will be leaving the EU, so therefore the vote tonight is about making sure we do the will of the people and we enact that process. Yes, we are still grieving about that. Many people are up and down the country, but we've got to be clear that when we voted for a referendum, we have to be bound by that result, unfortunately. So that means now we have to get on with that business and get on to saying, well, what does Brexit mean and what will the negotiations look like?
The extraordinary thing is your party doesn't seem to have accepted or even respected that grief. I mean, there is no representation of it in Parliament, as far as one can see.
Oh, well, we have been. We've been debating it for the last couple of days, but we've been absolutely clear right from the start that we wouldn't frustrate the process of leaving Europe, that we respect the democratic will of the people, but that we want to hold the government to account on it. We've been quite successful at that so far. We've had a white paper. The government didn't want to do that. We've had concessions from the government, and we'll continue to do that.
OK. Heidi Allen, the really fascinating thing here has been that the great drive for Brexit has been one about sovereignty for many people. And yet, when it came to the sovereignty of Parliament, the government had no interest whatever in either offering MPs a vote on the terms of Brexit or indeed offering a white paper. All these things, even tonight, the very fact that you're standing there has had to be dragged out of the government at every stage.
Well, it's funny because Angela and I were chatting about this earlier, actually. It's not just the government, it's, you know, some of the citizens of the UK as well, that they like the idea of sovereignty when it came to having national referendum, but now when it comes to debating the deal, well, should Parliament have a role? So clearly it's confusing for some. I think it's absolutely right. I think, to be fair to the government, in their view, the number of debates we've had, the select committees that are set up, the number of questions that are responded to in the House, they probably felt that enough meaningful debate would take place. But I'm certainly pleased that we do have a white paper, and I was disappointed that one of the amendments got turned down last night, which would have given Parliament a greater say in the final deal. But I think slowly we are inching there. And, you know, it is vital that Parliament has a role in this. My Remain constituency will want to make sure that I have given it everything I've got to make sure that deal works and is sensible for my constituents.
But when it comes to it tonight, how many of your colleagues will actually vote against Brexit?
On my side, I suspect only one. I would imagine only Ken Clarke will.
And he has now assumed for the 48% a heroic status.
Yes, he has. I mean, it's funny that the 48%, I have a lot of those in my constituency too, but most are, you know, as Angela described, maturely reaching the conclusion that this wasn't a normal vote last year in June. This was a national referendum. We put the answer, or the question rather, into the hands of the British people. So it's right that we absolutely respect that. And most of my constituents are coming round to that and now are just interested in the deal and let's making sure we get the very best out of it. You know, we've moved on.
Angela Rayner, do you think that there will be comeback for MPs in their constituencies?
Well, I hope not. This is the democratic process, you know, constituents sometimes, you know, we often say we speak on behalf of our constituents, but of course constituents have different views at times, so you have to make a judgment call based upon the situation that you're in. There was a referendum, it's clear what that referendum result was, and you know, MPs have to do what they think's right by their constituents and by the country. We're clear as the Labour leadership that we have to respect that mandate, and we will be voting to trigger Article 50, but making sure that the government responsible to Parliament and we get the best possible deal for our constituents.
Yeah, I mean, you talk a very good story, but the truth is you are bitterly and perhaps terminally destroyed by this vote. This is the worst sort of division Labour has seen in many, many years.
Well, John, you talk a good story and the media do, because I'm living and breathing what's happening here, and I'm not seeing those level of divisions. Yes, people are quite rightly upset and concerned about what Brexit will mean to them, but our shadow cabinet and our leadership are absolutely clear and have been right from the start that we have to respect the democratic will of the people and that we will trigger Article 50.
And Heidi Allen, finally, you're satisfied that henceforth Labour, Tory, Liberal, Scott Nat's MPs will get a proper role in what happens from here on in to get a decent deal in Europe?
Absolutely, and it's incumbent on every single one of us to make absolutely certain that we do.
Well, thank you both very much indeed for joining us. Thank you. Coming up later in the programme...
Gillian Traun, why are you hiding from us?
On the trail of Labour in Cumbria, where the party is fighting to hold on to its seat in the Copeland by-election.
Catastrophic and rapidly deteriorating. That's how the UN has described the situation in Yemen, as it warns the country is on the brink of famine. 2 years of war in which a Saudi-led coalition is bombing Houthi rebels to restore the former government has ravaged the country and left 12 million people facing starvation. It's now appealed to the world for a $2 billion fund for food and emergency care. It is the hidden disaster in a little-mentioned war. Famine threatens millions, say the UN, as they launch their biggest ever appeal for international governments to feed 12 million people in Yemen.
If there is no immediate action, and despite the ongoing humanitarian efforts, famine is now a real possibility for 2017. Malnutrition is rife and is rising at an alarming rate.
When I visited last summer, the telltale signs of impending famine were there. Babies like Atan, starving to death because their mothers were so malnourished they were unable to breastfeed anymore. Are you able to eat yourselves? Do you have enough food at home for yourselves? So every day, that's it, just flour? No fruit, no vegetables, no meat? Britain gave £112 million of aid in the last year, but it also sold £3 billion worth of weapons to Saudi Arabia, which is bombing Yemen's Houthi rebels as part of a coalition trying to restore the former president, crippling the economy and making the food crisis worse.
What you have is people having to make life and death decisions. Do you feed your child or your children, or do you pay for medical treatment for the sick child? And that's a daily call for many families.
The fighting is getting closer to the port of Hodeidah, where most of Yemen's food imports are brought in. Last year, we filmed the cranes destroyed by Saudi airstrikes, so the unloading of ships there is now painfully slow. If fighting closes the port, the effect on food supplies would be catastrophic. Bomb fragments found in Hodeidah since the war started suggest British and American bombs are being used here. But British sales could soon be stopped by a judicial review begun this week into whether we are selling weapons used to break international humanitarian law. Donald Trump, however, has moved the other way, moving to unfreeze Saudi weapons deals put on hold by Obama. Amid the war, children like Atan are starving to death in Yemen every day. We will soon know how much of the $2 billion the UN wants to stop this becoming a full-blown famine has been raised.
In the United States, President Trump has accused the court that is considering legal challenges to his ban on travellers from 7 predominantly Muslim countries of having political motives. Speaking to a gathering of law enforcement workers, Mr. Trump said a president is allowed to restrict immigration that they deem as detrimental to the country. But he described a federal appeals court hearing on the subject yesterday as disgraceful.
We want security. One of the reasons I was elected was because of law and order and security. That's one of the reasons I was elected. Also, jobs and lots of other things. But I think one of the strongest reasons is security. And they're taking away our weapons one by one. That's what they're doing.
It could be a brief window as President Trump's lawyers fight to reinstate his travel ban. Many in these countries on the list are seizing the opportunity to get into the United States while they can. Among them a Yazidi couple from northern Iraq, whose flight was cancelled last week. Late last night, they were told they could leave for America. Our foreign correspondent, Jonathan Rugman, joined them on their journey to the airport.
It is 1 o'clock in the morning and a bleary-eyed couple are leaving an Iraqi hotel for a new life in America. Or so Nizar and Vian Rasho hope. Last week their flight was cancelled after President Trump's travel ban. But a few hours ago, the UN's resettlement agency phoned them and told them the trip was back on. Though at the very moment they're checking out of this hotel room, the US president is in effect trying to stop them in a court hearing 6,500 miles away.
Tamam. İşteğinden bağır.
Do you feel as if you're in a hurry because President Trump might try to reimpose his ban?
We're afraid of that, yeah.
So you've got to go tonight?
Yeah. And we will see what happens. We don't know. We're a bit afraid about that, but...
You mean you might get turned back at the airport?
Yeah. Sure.
The Rashos are swapping the Middle East for Lincoln, Nebraska, which takes in more asylum seekers per capita than any American state. They are refugees from Iraq's Yazidi minority. It's thought 5,000 of their people have been murdered by ISIS. 500 of Mr. Rasho's fellow villagers are believed to be buried in a mass grave. Mrs. Rasho wore a burqa to escape. He's a lawyer, she has a degree in chemistry, and they're searching for one last piece of luggage. The heat and light of this bazaar in Erbil, a far cry from the icy shopping malls of the American Midwest. So it's your last day. How do you feel?
I feel excited, especially because it was my dream when I was like, even while I was a little kid, I was like, my dream to go to US and study something there.
I'm not so excited to go. You know, nobody wants to leave your country, your village, your everything.
What are you going to miss about Iraq?
I will miss everything, but I know like it's a good choice to go there because here it's just not safe. You cannot speak. You cannot be yourself. What I'm worried about it a little bit is just to start from zero again, and we don't know what will happen.
Because you started from zero when ISIS took over your village.
Yes, exactly.
For this couple, Iraq's descent began long before ISIS. Both Vian's brothers worked as translators for the US Army. Both received death threats. Most of the Rasho family has already fled to Europe or America. They've been told they can take 2 suitcases each. They've no idea which flight they are on, just ordered to be at the airport for 2 a.m. And they say President Trump is wrong if he thinks they haven't been subjected to endless background checks.
They ask us how we escaped and many details. And
so they want to check that you're not a threat to America.
Yeah, exactly. And which is good, right. which is right. Yeah, I respect that.
If the US president wins his case, they fear that their fellow Iraqi Yazidis, as well as persecuted Muslims and Christians, would be barred from entering America again.
I wish, like President Trump, know there's many good people living here in Iraq and Syria, and they need to be safe. They need to be in another place.
And you think he'll be safe in Nebraska?
Yeah, I think so. Hope to see you in the future.
Yeah, bye-bye. And as we say goodbye, their departure feels like an appalling indictment of religious freedom in the land of their birth.
Okay, thank you, man. Thank you for you.
Iraq's loss is surely Lincoln, Nebraska's gain. Jonathan Rugman, Channel 4 News, Erbil.
The government has announced that the UK will take in just 350 of the 3,000 child refugees it promised to accept under the Dubs Amendment because councils have run out of space. Ministers introduced the programme last year after coming under intense pressure to give sanctuary to some of the estimated 90,000 unaccompanied children stranded on the European mainland. Now, it's a landmark decision which could affect millions of unmarried couples. Denise Brewster had been living with her partner, Lenny McMullen, for 10 years when he died suddenly. Because they weren't married, she wasn't automatically entitled to share his pension. She challenged that ruling, and today the Supreme Court backed her claim. Jane Dodge reports.
Just about everyone did it back in the 60s, even if it wasn't for the most romantic of reasons.
What made you choose today as your wedding day?
Oh, the tax rate about it.
And there are still tax incentives, but these days fewer people are tying the knot. More than 6 million of us live together outside marriage, but it seems when it comes to pensions, the law has failed to keep up. Denise Brewster and Lenny McMullen lived together in Coleraine in Northern Ireland for 10 years. They weren't married, and when he died in 2009, she was told she wasn't entitled to a share of his pension.
That was like putting salt into my wounds. That because we weren't married, that our love was any less. I was fighting for our love, and he was worth fighting for.
The couple had failed to sign a nomination form naming Denise as Lenny's partner. It's a common requirement for cohabiting couples with public sector pensions. But today, the highest court in the land branded it unlawful discrimination.
This has gone on for 7 years, but it was worth it in the end because not only have we won our case, but it's also going to impact so many other families out there.
This is the first time that the Supreme Court has ruled that it's unlawful to discriminate on the basis of marital status. It'll affect unmarried couples in Northern Ireland who are in the local government pension scheme. But it could also have big implications for millions of others working in the public sector.
Many of the other big public sector pension schemes maintain the nomination form requirement. So the Civil Service Pension Scheme, the NHS Pension Scheme and the Teachers Pension Scheme, the three very big ones, all maintain this requirement, and we would expect them as a result of this judgment to have to remove it.
I think the big issue has always been cost. If you're going to give fair rights to cohabiting couples, you need to level up to what married couples get, and there's a bill attached, and that's never been a priority for government. I hope this judgment gives that more impetus.
Now Nicola Elms and her family will go to the High Court to try to get today's ruling extended to include historic cases like hers. She lived with David Smith for 21 years and they had 2 children together. He died in 2011.
While I was in a grieving state, I was having to fight to get something that he believed I would be entitled to. I hope that my case goes forward and allows me to receive the pension.
Legal experts are divided about what impact, if any, today's ruling will have on other pension schemes. All the Treasury would say tonight is that it's considering any possible implications.
Jane Dodge reporting. Now, for the latest report as part of Channel 4's Fake News Week, one movement which has fuelled and been fuelled by fake news is the so-called alternative or alt-right. Many say it is just relabelling for the far right. It's a term which encompasses a range of often young, right-wing speakers and bloggers. Some have become notorious for their views on race, religion, gender. Many in America also helped promote fake news about President Trump's election opponents. Inevitably, the so-called alt-right has attracted supporters here. Channel 4 News has been hearing from some of them. They disagree about what the movement actually stands for, and they don't all share the same extreme views. But they're united in believing that Western culture is under threat. And a warning, this film does contain words and symbols you may find offensive.
The left is dead. We are winning. We've worked hard for this for years. We're finally getting there.
Trump is our mascot. Trump is someone who we put our faith into. That's the job of the alt-right, bringing that cultural influence into politics.
Oh, the alt-right. Well, I see us pretty much everywhere I go on the internet. The umbrella term is for anyone that's against white people being replaced in their own nations. But it's a general term that covers a lot of things.
How long ago did you consider yourself left-wing?
I'd say it was probably a year ago when I was still wearing my Rage Against the Machine t-shirts and things. So, but at first I refused to even watch the videos because I said I don't want to listen to a racist because I was narrow-minded. I was like watching the videos around January, February time last year, and by April I'd made like a full conversion. I felt like I was stumbling onto this huge monumental truth, and I was like, I couldn't just resist the urge.
When I was growing up, like, all I've known is middle class, very liberal. I've always been surrounded by the same people. My whole family, like even my grandparents, they're left-wing. We're a Brighton family. Now I'm the editor-in-chief of a right-wing website. I think my parents think that I don't understand, that I'm ignorant, and that I've got a lot of growing up to do.
Do they know about everything? Do they know about the website?
No.
You don't know?
No. I consider myself a feminist, but that was the point where I kind of like started like Googling like other things. I came across a video by Paul Joseph Watson, and I watched it and I was like, hang on a second, like that's what I think. Do other people think the same as me?
What was the video?
I think it was about Islamophobia and how it's not a thing. I started reading Breitbart and like found other YouTubers and, you know, found my people, so to speak.
I was about 16, 15, so they got to me quite young, so to speak. I'm primarily a libertarian, but I sympathize with the alt-right. It happens on the internet, in forums, in Reddit, 4chan, YouTube, Facebook. That's where all the discussion is, that's where all the debate is, that's where all the fun is, basically, the entertainment, so to speak. The amazing thing the alt-right has done is it's fused politics, culture and entertainment in one. You know, it allows you to be a Nazi frog on Twitter and troll conservatives who are completely outraged by this. But it's so fun to witness the outrage of socialists and leftists and conservatives.
I started off in the BNP and I was contacted by Paul Weston and Liberty GB, and I've been doing that ever since. And we stood for election in Batley and Spen.
As Islam becomes a more dominant force in the UK, we are going to see more children being gang raped, we're going to see more beheadings on the street, we're going to see more terrorism, and a total destruction of Britain's cultural identity.
So the alt-right started around 2008, 2009. I've kind of been on the edges of it because I've never bought into absolutely everything. I consider myself just a conservative. I don't think I'm radical. The alt-right's a little bit more radical.
Congratulations, Donald Trump, and congratulations everyone else. You know, we've worked hard for this for years, and we're finally getting there. The politics have changed drastically, and that's just because the culture's changed as well. There's a great phrase that some people use, is like we've memed this world into life. You know, it's gone from being an internet movement to a wider movement of people who went out and voted. It's a winning strategy, and I want to get in on that.
Yeah, I've got a ton of stuff going on here.
What do your friends and family think about your beliefs?
My family think it's dangerous. My white friends don't quite know. My friends of other races, I've had to speak to them about it because I think it's a concern that it's all our concern. But for now, I need to keep my identity secret until I've at least got some people in my personal life that understand my qualms. I just sort of started seeing how the world's been changing over the past year, and I thought, I don't want this future. I don't want my children to grow up, or my future children to grow up a minority in their country. It doesn't mean I hate any other group. I don't hate any other group. I just believe that every group has its own rights and that white people's needs and rights need to be respected like every other group.
And is the alt-right helping?
Helping? Oh yeah, it's helping because it's helping ensure that there could be a future rather than my people being erased.
But are you verifying the stuff that you see on YouTube?
Well, I can make up my mind from it.
But are you fact-checking it?
Yes, some of it. But you can't constantly fact-check everything you see. That's rather tedious. But yeah, there's a lot of it that... Do you fact-check everything you see on the mainstream media?
How do you guys know each other and how come you're friends?
We met through college, but we weren't friends immediately.
How come?
He thought I was racist. I'd send him videos that he's hooked on now, and he'd say, "Stop sending me your racist videos," and things like that. He was a socialist.
Yeah.
And what changed?
I helped him see the light.
In terms of the alt-right, I'd say I try to like not class myself as a member. What people don't understand is that it's a very flexible term. Like, I'm very uneager to identify as alt-right because
I wouldn't call myself
it's like because of the stigma.
No, I'd call myself a proud boy, a Western chauvinist. I'd call myself a conservative, a libertarian, a paleo-conservative. I'd never call myself alt-right because I just don't care about hating Jews and white supremacy.
The bell curve is, as I'll show you, it's the idea that there's the average IQ is 100, and there are as many people on this side, on the quote-unquote dumb side, as on the intelligent side. But this is, for example, the one for white people, but the one for example, blacks, as the book describes, is sort of more over here. There's still a bell curve, but there's a smaller one, and it's slightly shifted.
And is this popular reading in the alt-right?
This is definitely required reading if you want to be alt-right. You know, this is what you have to know, that there's a difference in IQ between blacks and whites, or the Mexicans and...
It's just a theory. There's no science behind that.
No science? Well, I would certainly disagree. And these are scientific psychological studies. We come on to Mein Kampf. I simply believe that, you know, if you like history, even just you should read this, because this is probably the important book of the 20th century. Even if you're not alt-right, you should have read this.
But how do the ideas of Hitler fuse into the alt-right?
They see him as the archetype of a person who they should be. You know, just like maybe say Muslims see Muhammad as the archetype of a Muslim. They see Hitler and Nazi Germany as how the world should be. But that's more extreme strands of the alt-right. But still, that strand is probably the biggest strand of it.
Does that bother you?
Certainly, to an extent, as a Pole, that kind of on a even a personal level should. But my hatred of communism is still bigger than my hatred of, for example, Nazi Germany.
How do you feel about the accusation that the alt-right is racist?
It's true. It's simply true. You can't get around it. I'm not necessarily a particular advocate of that.
How can you get past that?
I guess because it's such a large crowd. It's such a, actually ironically, diverse group of people that a libertarian can find his place among it.
You have all these soft-spoken intellectuals on the internet who are called Nazis, and it's nonsense. They're ordinary people who just have perhaps slightly controversial views. Even very moderate people are called like things like that. Like Milo Yiannopoulos, kind of...
Is he a moderate?
He's very moderate. He's been called far-right. And he's like a liberal, a classic liberal. But he's been called far-right. That's nonsense. People like me are far-right, good heavens.
You have to look at where it goes. And where does this stuff go?
Oh, come on. Are you seriously suggesting that people pontificating on the internet leads to, you know, stamping down people's doors? No, nonsense. That's total nonsense.
we're not young people who don't know what we're doing. You know, this isn't like a phase or whatever. Like, we genuinely want to kind of like make it all shiny and new.
It's coming off the internet and people are meeting up in person more and more, and eventually they'll get together and it won't be what you'd expect. Like, most of these people are very unstereotypical. They're not like the sort of people you find on EDL marches or BNP marches.
I don't care about race. I honestly don't. I care about Europe's culture being snowed under by multiculturalism.
Years ago, I was terrified of being called a racist. It's like the worst thing ever. And now it's so many of us get called racist, we just go, all right, fine, whatever, call me racist. Maybe I'm a racist. I don't care. If being racist, if what I say is racist to all these people, then fine, call me racist.
We're all looking at America in sort of glee and hope. You know, so we're hoping that success translates into, for example, Le Pen in France, or Alternative for Deutschland, or the Swedish Democrats. As one of my friends said, your politics has ended, mine has just begun.
Well, Jack Buckby is the co-founder of a new right-wing magazine. You've just seen him in that piece. Barbara Toomey is a political activist from the NUS Black Students Campaign. And from Dublin, we have Angela Nagle, who's an expert in this area and has written about online culture wars. Angela, there have always been angry people who didn't like immigrants or hated Jews or hated Muslims. But there were a relatively small number of them, so they didn't really matter. What we see now is this sort of radicalisation of young people on the internet. Does this make them losers with laptops or a political movement?
Well, there are multiple layers of it, and this is one of the things that makes it very difficult to talk about because, for example, Milo Yiannopoulos, who's mentioned, is very different politically to the hardcore of the alt-right, which is a very American phenomenon and which does have explicitly racial politics. So it's quite a long journey from that hardcore of the alt-right to, for example, the average Trump voter. So in a way, you know, I wouldn't want to in any way underestimate it as a movement because it is a kind of avant-garde, even so the fact that it's small doesn't matter too much. But it certainly is going to be very culturally influential and already has been.
Jack Buckby, you stood for election, you got 220 votes.
Yeah.
You've got a few thousand Twitter followers.
Sure.
I mean, there have always been people like you, haven't there? I mean, is there anything new about what you're doing?
No, I wouldn't say there's anything new, but I'd say definitely the way that we go about politics has changed. You know, my election campaign, you know, if we're going to talk about that, was primarily to cause a discussion about what I believe was a serious issue in the area, and which is, you know, we've seen is a serious issue.
But nobody agreed with you, is the point. I mean,
well, no,
you know, you got 1.1% in the
yeah, I
so,
know. I don't think that's true. I mean, I'm from a very small political party with a very small amount of funding. The point was never to win.
So not many people think the way you do.
See, I disagree with that. You know, we had 4 million people voting for UKIP, and many of those agree with me. You know, I don't associate with this fringe of the alt-right, which is, you know, neo-Nazi, white supremacist kind of thing. But these 4 million UKIP voters agree with many of the kind of ideas that I talk about. I know a lot of people who are high up in UKIP who agree with me on almost all things, and I know many Tory voters and many traditional Labour voters believe the same as well. So what we've seen is it doesn't work out in politics, but it is creating a new online culture.
Barbara Toomey, I mean, can you afford to ignore him?
I've never said that we should ignore people like Jack, to be honest. I am actively campaigning and will continue to ignore people, to campaign against people like Jack and the views that he stands for. I think it's absolutely despicable that you can sit here and basically spout these things that basically infringe on the rights of other people to just exist in society. It's ridiculous. Like, you're able to exist and be you, but yet your whole movement and your whole thing is about how, you know, for some reason, black people have low IQs. I mean, he's proven that there's no actual biological difference between black and white people. That's a myth. That's pseudosciences from the 1800s that you keep bringing back. So I'm just completely astonished. Somebody's well-educated that you know, chooses to believe such nonsense, quite frankly.
I'd love to know where you got this information from, because I don't believe those things that you're talking about.
But you have said people should be deported, haven't you?
Yes, people who are a drain on the economy, absolutely, yes.
What, so white people as well?
So who gets to define
anybody who's a drain on the economy?
No. Who gets
can't
who gets to
deport
decide
people
who's
who
a
were born
drone?
here.
Oh, so black people who were born here, they can stay, right?
Yes,
Is
absolutely.
that okay?
Yes.
Right, so who gets to define who's
No,
a
I
drone
love
in
this
society?
sort of faux outrage you've got going on here. You're saying, oh, you hate black people. You don't think people should exist. It's constant faux outrage. And you know what? You are the reason we exist. You are the reason this online movement exists.
My
because
black
we are sick.
existence is the reason you exist.
Stop bringing race into it. We hate the fact that you people take the moral superiority. But you know what? Put your money where your mouth is. Syrian refugees, application form. Take one home. Take an Syrian refugee. I hope you don't get raped. Because we talk about these serious issues and you demean us. You attack us.
I can afford rent for a one-bedroom house, so I don't, I don't have the financial means to do that. You probably do, though, with all your money.
Oh, all the money I've got. Where did I get that from?
No,
do we? Let me just sort of. I mean, the point is, it's a bit like a religion. Watching this, it's like watching two people who just believe different things. And I just wonder whether you see the similarity between what you're doing and what ISIS are doing, and that you're sort of. There's a radicalisation going on, isn't there?
ISIS are throwing gays off buildings. They're attacking feminists. People like you are evil to those people. They want you dead. We're talking about these serious issues, and you sit there with your faux outrage, scuffing when you hear something you don't like. It's despicable.
Just address the point. What I'm saying is, you're organising online. You make videos. You make these sorts of videos with music, and you cut in pictures of attacks and terrorist attacks and all that kind of stuff. That's exactly what ISIS and Al-Qaeda do. And they prey on vulnerable people.
That's really not
and I wonder whether you're preying on similarly vulnerable people.
I'm portraying a message to people who a lot of people already understand these issues. Some people are on the edge of realising that there are issues. But to try and compare our movement, and again, I don't associate with these ultra-right white supremacists. I'm not one of those. If anything, I'm a paleo-libertarian. But our ideals are entirely...
Hang on. Okay, let's just establish
really
that. You want Britain to be essentially white, don't you?
No, I think it should be majority indigenous.
It is already majority white. What is the problem? White people make up... Listen, white people make up 20% of the world's population. The reason why I'm sat in this country today is because Britain came to my country hundreds of years ago. That is the exact reason why I'm sat here today. So don't this pretend... No, but the reason why I'm here is because you were in my country first. You invaded, still, and enslaved. My point is I have every right to be here in the same way you
I would love to know where you got this idea that I don't think you don't have a right to be here. As silly as I think you are, I think you've got every right to live here.
Britain is still a majority white country.
Barbara and Toomey.
Britain is still a majority white country.
Let me bring you in.
I'm not saying it's not.
Let me bring you to the point that actually Jack raised earlier, which is it the failure of progressive politics, of the left, to appeal to young people and to offer them a future that means that some of them, a small number admittedly, but some of them are being seduced by this?
A small number of people are obviously seduced by this. That's just the fact.
Well, they just always would be.
I don't think that there's anything wrong with the left and progressive not being able to make the case. I think we're living in a very particular time where austerity, people's living standards are being driven, and the left has not been able to be empowered to improve that. That's just a fact. We're at the height of capitalism at the moment, where it's exploit, and the easiest way to do that is to tell groups of people that other people are the problem. Why have you brought in an application from here for a Syrian refugee? What's that got to do with anything that we're discussing in here? No, but that's the point. That's exactly the point.
Let's just go to Angela. I mean, I don't know what you've made of this argument that's been going on in the studio. I want to come back to whether this is something that is really powerful and dangerous, as many people would see it, or whether it's just, a bunch of kids who'll grow up eventually and feel a bit embarrassed about how they felt.
No, I think it's important not to underestimate it, particularly because in terms of what you were just saying a moment ago about the left, I mean, really the centre has collapsed in quite a major way, as we've seen, particularly with the election of Donald Trump. What you have is really a kind of exhausted and quite bankrupt centre-left and centre-right who are kind of progressive neoliberals who really believe in nothing other than the market. And it was quite sad to hear some of the young people in that video because many of them clearly feel, very fatalistic about the future. That doesn't excuse what they're saying, but it tells us that we are really lacking a vision at this point.
Well, we must leave it there. Angela Nagle, Barbara and Toomey and Jack Buckby, thank you for coming in. I'm sorry if any of those views offended you, but it's Channel 4's job to explore minority views, and that's what we do. John.
After the break, the Battle of Copeland. We're in the Cumbrian constituency where Labour's under fire from the Tories in this month's by-election. Away from Westminster, Labour faces major tests in 2 by-elections later this month, in Stoke-on-Trent Central and in the Copeland constituency in Cumbria, where the Conservatives are the main electoral threat. From there, our political correspondent Michael Crick reports.
Whitehaven, some say, was the last place in England to suffer foreign invasion in 1778 during the American War of Independence. Bluecoats came ashore by night, spiked English guns, but then fled. Today these parts face a new blue insurgency.
It's lovely to meet you.
And you, yeah.
Thank you very much.
I do hope you're getting another voting for you.
Conservative Trudy Harrison hopes to seize Copeland from Labour.
Other issues on which you'd be willing to rebel against your government, the Conservative government?
My track record is in supporting my community, and I'll do whatever that takes.
Even if it meant voting against the government?
Even if it meant voting against the government.
She opposes cuts to services at the nearby hospital, while the other big local issue is the nuclear complex at Sellafield. Tory leaflets quote this speech by Jeremy Corbyn 6 years ago.
I say no nuclear power, decommission the stations we've got, and let's have an intelligent energy policy based on sustainability, not destruction. Thank you.
But Corbyn now says nuclear will feature in Labour's energy plans, but the party wouldn't let us ask their candidate about that, or even meet her. She was too busy, they said. But we did find this ex-cabinet minister.
I have fought by-elections, I've run by-elections. Have you run a by-election hiding your candidate? It's a sign of how desperate Labour is. Scared, how scared Labour is.
I've been here, what, an hour? A fantastic time on the doorstep, lots of Labour support, very good campaign.
Finally, we tracked her down.
Gillian Traun, why are you hiding from us?
Hello.
Doesn't this rather suggest you're a rather weak candidate, the way in which you've been hiding from us? Why aren't you willing to talk to us? Do you speak? Isn't Labour being rather confused on the nuclear issue?
A man on the street put Labour's nuclear case rather better.
In all my time at Sellafield, I think the only investment that was ever produced down there was produced by Labour. And for them to say that they're anti-nuclear is a load of bunkum.
I'm voting Conservative.
Are you? Do you normally vote for them?
No.
Really? What do you normally vote?
Labour.
And why are you switching?
Because he didn't guarantee Sellafield jobs.
What about other people, other Labour voters? Do you think some of them will perhaps not bother?
I don't think they'll bother.
Really?
No.
Why not?
Nobody's bothered.
Really? A lot of Labour voters won't bother?
I don't think anybody will be bothering.
Copeland voted more than 60% Brexit last year, but UKIP seemed to be concentrating on the Stoke by-election, not this one.
We've had quite a few volunteers from across the country coming up to help, which is great. Yes, I'm looking forward to
But presumably most people are being told to go to Stoke.
Well,
it's a long way to get to
here. It's a lot easier to get to, isn't it? I mean, Copeland has been forgotten about, which is why I want to put it back on the map.
The other two parties both start from a tiny base.
We've got extreme issues here in Copeland. We've got probably the most serious NHS and education issues in the country. I've been a leading campaigner on that for a long time already. I'm very well known. We're well organised. People are extremely aware of the issues and they are looking for someone credible that they can believe in.
You're the Green candidate. You don't like nuclear power. Most people around here do.
I don't agree. They like jobs.
You would think they like jobs, but they don't like nuclear power?
Yes. I was speaking to someone just this morning who works at Sellafield who said, I don't like working there, but the pay is good, and until there's something better, I'm going to have to keep doing it.
But the story is Labour's in trouble here and in Stoke. It could be the first time since 1854 an opposition party has lost two by-elections in different places on the same day.
Michael Crick, here's the full list of the candidates standing in Copeland's by-election on the 23rd of February.
While we've been on air, the government has released a statement saying no extra money has been promised to Surrey County Council in return for them cancelling their council tax referendum. But there have been discussions for a pilot area for reforms to social care. Not sure what that means. We'll look into it.
We'll find out. It'll be on Channel 4 News sooner or later. That's Channel 4 News. Good evening.
Bye-bye.